This is Lemon's Car Spotting. You post to Instagram with the hashtag Lemon's Car Spotting. We pick the hooptiest.
They are so incredibly terrible.
And which one we want to become a real Lemons build.
It does car-like things. I've been pushing for one of those in Lemons too, and those are very affordable.
It's Lemon's Car Spotting. We're going to pick some cars. We got the Lemons build here, the hooptiest here. Eric, tell me when to stop.
Stop.
That's the hooptiest. I'm doing the Lemons build. Let's get going. Man, this is one of those cars. I mean, what is it? A Stanza?
Sentra? Is that a B12?
I don't know the difference between a Stanza and a Sentra. This looks bigger to me than what would have been a Sentra at that time, but God, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Man, when I was a kid, this was like the car that was around.
I think that's a Sentra.
Okay.
I'm going only by the tiny wheels and tires that are on it. The Stanza was a slightly bigger car.
Right.
But in the same way that like in the 80s, like the Accord and the Civic were different sizes, but comparing them to any modern day car, you can't tell them apart.
Right.
In a parking lot from 100 yards away.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think this is a Sentra. Hatchback.
It's hatchback / little wagon, which of course, I've got a Mazda 3. There's a GTI out there still, but man, the small wagon is a dying breed.
Yeah. Yeah, boy. Volvo makes a V60 and that is it.
Yeah. You can get
an Audi and a sport wagon.
Yeah, right. And you could get the Jetta for a while or whatever, Golf wagon. And then that became the all-track because everything has to be an SUV. But I think that might even be dead now. So anyway, hold on to your Sentra wagon, man. It's going to be a classic.
Boy, that must have like 9 horsepower.
Yeah. I don't think they were powerful, but I think they did last a long time, as is evidenced by the fact that it's still around. Oh, man, speaking of wagons. Well, it's a Ford of some kind.
Yeah, LTD, Fairmont, something.
Yeah, something like that. So it says electric car on the side, and in the comments, somebody says it's an EVA, which is Electric Vehicle Associates, and exceptionally rare.
Yeah.
So,
why do you think that somebody in the 80s couldn't make a workable concept out of a car that already weighed a ton?
You would think with the limited battery technology of the time, you would have started with a smaller vehicle. But hey, I don't know. Somebody needs to chronicle. What is the timeline of EVs? Because there definitely was a spike, like in the early 80s, of sort of, I'm being charitable, small volume production EV.
Right.
Like this one, which is basically like a dude in a shed who thought he could beat the system. There's a bunch of these. Some of them were built on regular cars like this and whatever that, Plymouth Horizon TC3 that we saw in Lemons. Plus, other weird stuff like the Uncar and whatnot.
Yeah. And there's a whole arc there.
Yeah.
Because, it all came out of the malaise era and the gas
guess
crisis.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was, what else can we do? Obviously, to make this affordable. So you had the Sebring Vanguard city car.
Right. Which arguably was the most popular of the era.
Right. And they sold, I don't know, probably a couple thousand of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. They are terrifying to look at and I'm sure drive. The electric Uncar, which we saw in a recent episode of this. And then, Jet Electrica
Right.
Famously with the 007 they made out of
the Omni Horizon.
The Omni Horizon, and they had Ford Escort versions.
Yeah. Right.
But, that was the right idea of starting with a small car.
Yeah.
You then wouldn't have to propel a ton of weight.
Right.
Going with a Fairmont wagon, it's an interesting choice.
It's an interesting choice, although it sort of foreshadows what we know now about EVs is that people want EVs that are just regular cars, like, right. make an EV Honda CRV, and that's what people want. They don't want a weird, like, little pod thing. But yeah, the technology didn't really support it back then.
Lead acid batteries and all that.
Pretty neat. Ooh, it's a Isuzu Pup Spacecab.
Oh man, yeah, I love the. I don't want to call it misaligned because it's a styling.
It's decision. A style statement.
Yeah, but the window that extends beyond the half cab window extending below the basically to the belt line, almost like that's a choice. That is certainly a choice.
This is a handsome truck in general. I mean, all of the Japanese 80s trucks were like actually basically good looking vehicles, but it's got these little sort of subtle flares, nice big fat wide deep offset wheels, which you never see anymore. Everything's got front wheel drive offset, and it gives it a certain presence. I think this one's been lowered, which helps too. And then, what was the deal with the pup? Was that because it was P''UP, which I guess is short for pickup? But how did you say it? Was it just pup, or was it put up? Or, I mean, what were they going for with that?
Yeah, I think it was, I don't know. You're asking me questions about marketing from one of those weird third tier Japanese companies that hardly sold anything here. So.
Well, and then, I mean, we've talked about this before, where like the Isuzu, whatever it was, the Isuzu Faster, that then was rebadged as the Chevy Love, and then you had this thing, which was just an Isuzu. Is that right?
I think so. I don't think it's an S10. It doesn't look like it.
But then later you had the Ombre, which was an S10. So it's very confusing.
And don't forget about the C270.
Oh, right. The I290 or whatever. The least known of the Isuzu rebadged options. But this one sort of stands on its own, and it's kind of neat. Well done.
Yeah, I like the red grille surround. It's kind of like a nice touch, color keyed.
Yeah, no, the whole thing's kind of cool. It's also suspiciously on flat tires and with a modern Tacoma in the background, which sort of indicates somebody has moved on. But whatever, it looks good.
But not entirely.
Yeah, not entirely. Same idea. Okay. Oh man, we're into Phil Town. Of course, Judge Phil being the lover of obscure Korean cars, and yet does not own one. What is this thing even? Is it an Elantra? I have no idea.
This is
XG300.
I think it's an XG300 or 250 or 350. I don't. Yeah. I don't know if the numbers pertain to a trim or an engine displacement. I don't think anybody knows or cares too terribly deeply. But, somewhere along the way, I kind of put two and two together that what Hyundai does and what Kia do, what they do collectively is they take like a 5-year-old European luxury car and they kind of mash them all together. So this one has some kind of S-type, but also from the back, it looks very Mercedes, and the Kia Amante, especially, has the Mercedes grille. So basically, it's like you go to Burlington Coat Factory to buy a jacket that was in style 5 years ago. This is what Hyundai brings to the party. It's functional. It'll keep you warm. It's not totally awful to look at. Does seem somehow out of date when it's brand new. And so you have this car exactly like this one that is now hella toe up. It somehow looks
toe up from the flow up.
It looks way more rickety somehow when they're 10 years old because it's a 15-year-old design at that point.
Right. Well, I can't add much to that.
Yeah.
You have Hyundai experience, post in the comments.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. The Merkur Scorpio.
Yes. This is a car we've never had in Lemons.
Yeah. So what is it? I mean, the XR4 Ti was a Ford Sierra.
This is also a Ford Sierra. This is the sedan version.
Is that right? I thought it was a bigger car.
It's a 4-door version, and it's not turbo. It's the Cologne V6.
Right.
So it's a 2.9. I don't know if they sold them with a stick. They hardly sold any of them in the United States. This is a rare classic.
Well, this is for the person for whom a Saab 9000 is too mainstream.
That's right.
So it's kind of a small group. But we've never had one in Lemons. And boy, any Merkur, those are the only 2 Merkurs they sold here, right?
Yeah.
mean, basically, God, speaking of weird badge engineering, like what was the motivating factor behind Merkur? I guess it was like you already had Ford Lincoln Mercury.
Right.
And I guess Merkur, literally being Ford of Europe, was more like it would compete with a BMW, maybe. But then, of course, they called it Merkur. That's GM stuff,
Right.
GM would be like, we have a car that is the Bolt, and then we have a car that is the Volt, and they are 2 completely different cars that have different powertrains. Like, that's the kind of thing that Ford was on when they had we have Mercury, and then we're going to have Merkur, which, of course, I'm sure everybody said Merkur when it came out. Yeah. Nobody knew how to say it, which is another General Motors ism. We had a long discussion with Judge Phil and Armand about the Pontiac Parisienne and the percentage of GM buyers who know what that word is, how to say it, and what it means, and what it pertains to.
Yeah, this is one of the most befuddling things that happened ever in domestic car production. Selling this imported Ford. I assume it was sold at Lincoln Mercury dealerships, but
I would imagine, yeah.
Was there a Lincoln Mercury Merkur dealership? Did they put it on the sign, or was it just this handshake thing? Or you went to buy a Sable and they're like, well, what do you think about this?
How do you need a little European style in your life?
Right. How did someone end up in one of these, I guess?
God, yeah. Well, if anybody in the comments has owned a Merkur or knows somebody who has owned a Merkur, let us know how that happened.
Yeah, it's the old Suzuki dealership problem.
Yeah, right. All right. Next up, Chevy the Deuce. This is an early one, 63, 64. These are cool. I like these. What is to say? They competed obviously with the Ford Falcon, and I suppose the early Ford Falcon that was the rounded one, I think is maybe slightly cooler than this, but I think this might be cooler than the later squared off Ford Falcon.
Yeah, I think so. I've said this frequently that this kind of early attempts at building a compact car, which hilariously, this is a compact car. Yeah. They all kind of look right. They all got the proportions right. Chrysler had the Valiant and the Dart that looked absolutely bananas for a couple of years, but they kind of leveled off. And by 63, 64, they were all this, a good boxy shape, but proportion right, and kind of just a cool looking car. It's not really a surprise that all these have been souped up and kind of turned into cool, cruise night cars. If this one is an original straight 6 car with a column shift, I don't know how it exists.
Yeah,
still.
Well, that's what the caption says, is who's saving the salesman / grandma car. It is a car that you will see here in the Bay Area, there are every once in a while you'll see an old timer driving, one of these in Alameda or Berkeley. Although, man, old timers nowadays, I'm thinking of my parents, like,
Right.
they're almost too young to have driven this as an adult, So, yeah. Also, this is like some kind of a tire shop that apparently caters to classic vehicles, because there's like an old Chevy truck or something and a Bronco.
And something under a cover that looks like a boat, maybe. But
yeah. Well, pretty neat. I like it.
Yeah.
Next up. Speaking of classics.
Yeah.
You got yourself a suicide door Lincoln. I mean, these are super cool. This one, I mean, I don't know my years. I mean, this one is slightly later than the Pinnacle, which is the JFK 62, 63 era. So this is slightly later than that, but it's still got the suicide doors. It's pretty neat. It's got a Valiant or Dodge Dart behind it.
Yeah, that's a good pair, really. You're going to have big, squared off looking things. I think this is late 60s, because Mercury was making a Cougar and had a 4-door Cougar that also had suicide doors in the late 60s. Wow. Yeah.
Man.
It might have been like 67 that Mercury had the 4-door with suicide doors on a Cougar, which is kind of crazy.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Suicide doors. I mean, I'm sure there's some like horrible safety issue with them, or it's just nowadays it's too weird and people can't deal with it. My mom's Rover P4 has suicide doors. Super neat.
Yeah. Boy, I think this is beyond the weight limit for Lemons.
It probably is. We have a 4,200 pound weight cap, although that's primarily to rule out full size trucks. And, if you can get this within shouting distance of the limit, we might grant you a waiver, because this would look incredible on a racetrack.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at the 2-car team.
Yeah. I mean, you're set. You are chasing the IOE with that.
Definitely. All right. Next up. Oh man. Got a Circle K mobile right here. Actually, the unusual 4-door Chevelle. This is like 69, 70, 71, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these are yet another General Motors thing that was conceived and executed pretty well. Styling is good. Obviously, you had your choice of straight 6 and V8s that were all pretty good engines. Not much going against these. The 4-door, I assume, is still like nobody wants the 4-doors in the hot rod community. So I'm sure you could get one of these. You could probably get a hoopty one for Lemon's money.
Yeah, we've never had a Chevelle, as far as I know. I do know that. By the way, the year one banner. Judge Phil famously worked.
Yep.
At year one, writing catalog copy many years ago. He has many good stories about working there, but get him wound up sometime about that. But once Roadkill built one of these, a 4-door.
That's right.
There was kind of a point to it that, like, the whole concept, the coupes of any muscle car look good. And, they look better, and they weigh a little bit less, and they just have more sporty pretension to it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the 4-door thing and the whole Roadkill ethos. Which is really the Lemons ethos, that you can have fun with anything. You just don't need to set.
Well,
you set your sights a little lower, and you can.
Well, and I've said a million times, any old car is cooler than any modern car. And that might be the coot in me coming out, but like you could have the latest McLaren or whatever, Mercedes SLS, and like this car in its current state is cooler than that, I think.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
All right.
Bring us a Chevelle.
Let's see a Chevelle. Oh, dude. It's an Opel, a U.S. market Opel. So my family had one of these, although theirs was, I believe, this is a Manta, and my family had the. I think they just called it the Opel 1900 in the States, but it was the Kona elsewhere, which is essentially the same idea, but has a little bit more of an upright greenhouse and was available in a 4-door. But the Manta is cool, obviously kind of ruined by the giant US federal bumpers. Right. Has a 1900 motor like an Opel GT or anything else. They're kind of cool little cars.
Yeah, I don't think they sold the Manta here very much. There probably weren't very many of them.
Yeah, Kat, I remember when I was in high school, I took the bus the year before I got my BMW 2002, and there was one street that had a nice white Opel Manta parked on it. We used to pass every day. It is no longer there.
There's a famous German car movie called Manta about a highly souped up Opel Manta. It's basically like a German vanishing point.
Yeah, I feel like in Europe, if anybody is European or has lived in Europe, I'm always fascinated by we have all these automotive stereotypes and tribes here in the States. And if you go overseas, you kind of don't know how what the equivalents are. The thing that jumps out in my mind is I was in Australia and I saw a gathering of Holden Commodore VL turbos, and that's the real boxy one from the 80s. And I'm I don't know what this is. Are these muscle car people? Are they lowrider people? And I couldn't figure out the equivalent. I think later it turned out they're just Australian juggalos. Whatever the case, I feel like Mantas are kind of, because they made a movie about it, it's sort of like a muscle car, almost a Camaro kid here would have had a Manta in Germany. Let us know where it fits into this grand scheme of things over there.
I believe Australian juggalos are called bogans.
Oh, yes. Right. Yeah. All right. Next up. Oh, God. We're into the weird. Oh, dude. It's some kind of. It's a K-sized vehicle, like a Japanese K car, but it looks like sort of a bad Chinese copy of one, perhaps.
I can tell you what this is.
Okay.
I've seen one of these in person. This is a Tiger truck.
It's a Tiger truck.
Yeah, which is a Suzuki Every, I think,
okay.
That is license built in scenic Podo, Oklahoma, and they are for city and agricultural use only is the only way you can register them in some states. But it's a key van, / key truck / whatever this amalgamation of those styles is. But I saw one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a couple of years ago, and it fit an entire refrigerator in it. So.
Well, what you need to realize with these is they have zero in the way of crush structure.
Oh, yeah.
And so you can make a much more efficiently packaged vehicle when you don't have to pass the 12-mile-an-hour offset test without the dummy's head being ejected into space.
Right.
So I understand why they work, and I understand why you have to do some weird Tiger truck shenanigans to actually get them here, because otherwise, the DOT would never allow it. So,
yeah, the one I saw in Tulsa had a license plate that said whatever the Oklahoma designation was. It was city use only, on the license plate, 25 miles an hour. You are not allowed to go over 25 miles an hour in a municipality or anywhere on a public road with it. So,
well, pretty neat. With that in mind, probably not legal for lemons and probably doesn't meet the 82 inch wheelbase minimum. Speaking of which, I got an email this week from a guy I have it's Sprite or an MG midget and the wheelbase is 80 and your rules say 82. And then he said, "What do you think?" And I almost replied well, what I think, and I'm no expert, is that 80 is less than 82. But beyond that, I think that when we set that rule, it might have literally been okay, we don't want the midget because someone could get hurt.
Yeah.
So what's the next size up from the midget? So yeah.
I think before that rule was in place, there was one Sprite.
Like a Mark II Sprite. Yeah, I remember one at Button Willow, which is actually, I mean, they look cool when they're set up for racing. So
but they're also get runked over.
Yeah. We just, we have to got to draw the line somewhere. All right. Well, that brings us to awards. Eric, you've got the hooptiest.
Oh man, nothing is like totally out of left field in terrible shape. I mean, obviously this thing is hella toe up, but it was crap to begin with.
Yeah.
So, a key van not built in a key van factory in Japan, probably of substandard quality.
Yeah.
No offense to the fine people in Poto, Oklahoma who put them together. There is the pretty toe up Hyundai, but I feel like that's just the default again for a 16-year-old Hyundai at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with the least sensible vehicle of everything we've seen, which is the 3,900 pound with a normal drivetrain engine, converted for electric use. And whatever the hell this thing is, I mean, Jesus.
The EVA.
I'm sure it's somebody's pride and joy as this weird thing, and more power to you for saving it. It's as Nick puts it, there's an interesting story to be told about, the thread of electric car revival starting in the 70s, and this is part of that story. And it's good that it exists, but good Lord, why?
Why? Like how, I mean, if this really is electric vehicle associates, that implies that it's more than one guy in a shed, which it definitely was.
Yeah. It was two guys in a shed.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Well, for the Lemons build, sadly, a couple of cars that are like possibly illegal. Mini trucks, always cool. The Merkur is a finalist because we've never seen one, and it's just so weird. But as a classic car guy, I think I've got to go elsewhere in the German/American car realm and go with the Manta. We've had a couple of Opels, never a Manta. We've had an Ascona wagon and, of course, the tiny vet, the Opel GT, plus a couple other Opel GTs here and there. But yeah, you could make a really cool sort of little mini touring car, 70s style, with one of these. I like the very uniform surface rust paint scheme. You'd probably have to leave that. But otherwise, I mean, this thing would be a cool Lemons car.
Yeah, 100% agree. You could even, I assume it's probably the case that the engine that's in this thing is absolutely non-functional and or out of the car and or in pieces. So you could put something else in it. Within reason.
Any old car is going to get less scrutiny from the judges when it comes to engine swaps, for sure.
That's right. Yeah. And again, if you want the whole rundown on the Manta, Judge Phil can tell you everything you ever need to know about Manta, the movie, or whatever the hell it's called. So,
get Judge Phil a couple of beers and talk to him about Year One and Manta, the film.
That's right. There's nothing else needs to be said. Bring us some weird German-American crossover vehicle. Not a crossover, but, the tie vehicle. Bring us an Opel and said Merkur.
We'll bring the whole collection. And the Buick Opel is what was the Buick Opel?
It was an Isuzu.
I was going back. Of course, it was an Isuzu. A car with a combination American-German car name was, of course, an Isuzu because General Motors.
Yeah, it was the pre-iMark, which was something else in Japan. So.
Yeah, I think that one was also sold as a Holden in Australia. You could hang out with the Bogans.
You're right. It was a Gemini. It was the Isuzu Gemini. You're right.
Oh, God. Just makes your head spin. All right, well, keep bringing us down the cars. like this Opel, and we'll talk about them on the channel. Oh, dude.
Manta.
Manta.